Hi, I'm Chandler Klebs. It's been a long time since I've done one of these videos, but this is another one of my anti-choice determinist video series. And the funny thing is, just seeing how much my beliefs about things have changed over time, like when I go back to a few years ago, some of my videos that I'll delete because I don't agree with them anymore. Things like, for example, that video that I had up a long time ago that said, God can't know the future because humans have free will. Well, obviously, that's out the window because now the top priority in my life is explaining to people that free will is an illusion, why we don't have free will. And I think here's the question that a lot of people wonder: why is it so important for people to know they don't have a free will? Well, here's the deal. There are many reasons it's important to know. There are things that are true, but they don't matter all that much. Like, there are some things that just don't matter that much. Like, for example, whether you believe dinosaurs existed or not. And I do think there were dinosaurs, but the point is some facts don't have any relevance to our daily lives. And here's the thing that I think is important, is that some things are important just, because truth is important. Believing things are true is generally a good principle in navigating your life. Because with false beliefs, your actions that you take in your life will be based on false beliefs and you won't get the results you're expecting. So I think truth is very important. But see, truth alone, while is like my highest priority, I think honesty is the best policy, and that's part of what's changed in my life recently, is the focus on truth and realizing that I don't think I could lie even to save my life or someone else's life. And I'll talk more about that later. But the reason that some things such as understanding that libertarian free will is an illusion is because it's this basic thing about, if we believe that our choices that we make are free choices in the sense that they're not determined by prior causes, well, okay, there are two alternatives to it. Well, it's really kind of complicated because the only real alternative to determinism or causality, where what we do is based on prior causes, our genetics and our conditioning, the genes we had since conception, and of course, all our experiences up to the present moment. The only alternatives to that view is, well, indeterminism, for example. Indeterminism, the things happen randomly for no reason at all. So they happen for no reason. And what's interesting about that is we clearly don't live in a world where we see things happening for no reason. But that doesn't give us the moral responsibility. Sure, indeterminism gives you the freedom from causation that a lot of people think of when they think of free will, but it doesn't make you morally responsible. It doesn't make you the cause of your choices. So, this is important. I always have to start out by explaining what free will is, this belief. And let me go into a little bit of the history of it, because, the reason that I became involved in this free will topic is mostly because of the fact that, it is the number one response Christians give in answer to the problem of evil. How can a God who's all powerful, all knowing, and all good allow so much evil in the world? And then people say, well, there's this thing that's more powerful than the all-powerful God, and we can make choices that God can't know, that we're free to make choices other than what God knows, even though he's omniscient. And so the whole free will thing, it's like you're better off believing in an omniscient God who knows the future, or an omnipotent God, than you are believing in free will, in a sense, because free will is really crazy. Here's the deal: is you cannot claim to be you cannot claim, for example, to be deserving of heaven or hell. You can't get the credit or blame for anything. Not really. Now, for example, in different Christian denominations, they have different beliefs about what determines whether somebody goes to heaven or hell, for example, because that's pretty much what the religion seems to be about. And I know some Christians will disagree, but they won't be listening to my video, I don't think, because nobody listens to. Christians don't listen to some atheist who rants for half an hour about all sorts of things they disagree with. I could be wrong about that, though. But here's the deal. Some think it's based on what you believe. You believe a certain set of things, and that makes you go to heaven, and if you don't, then you go to hell. Some people say it's based on your actions and what good or bad things you do, like it's weighed up, and if you do more good deeds than bad deeds, then you deserve heaven. You know, stuff like that. And other people, like the Calvinists, like, well, it's predetermined whether you go to heaven or hell before you even exist. But here's the thing about it. No matter what the case, it doesn't matter which of those are right. And of course, I think none of them's right because I'm atheist and all that. But the reason I'm bringing all this up is that free will is always used to justify, well, this person chose to do this, and therefore they deserve to suffer the consequences of what they do. It's really strange because it seems like it's mostly focused on the negative. Like, sure, once in a while someone will say, well, this person deserves this good thing because of what they chose. But more often than not, it's like when someone does something good, then it's like, well, it's only because God allowed them to do it, or they were lucky, or that sort of thing. But when they do something bad, then all of a sudden it's their fault. So there's an asymmetry between credit and blame. People are blamed for things a lot more than they're credited for. So it's partly for that asymmetry that we see that the negative aspects of people believing in free will, where they blame and punish people and think that they deserve to suffer. Well, part of the problem with this is it causes us not to want to help people. We don't have empathy for people if we feel that they deserve the pain they're going through. And so that's part of it. But some people try to make the argument that, well, it's good for people to believe in free will because that will somehow make people behave morally, and then it'll all be moral chaos if people don't believe in free will, which is completely bizarre because free will belief makes people do immoral things. It makes people want to punish and seek revenge on people because they see that person as, well, they hurt me, so they deserve for me to hurt them. So, I mean, it's not just that free will is false because such a thing where you're responsible for your own choices, you're the self-causer, that you make choices out of nothing and yet take credit or blame for them. That's incoherent logically. But it's also a very harmful negative thing that increases crime and just makes people feel guilty about things when they couldn't have done otherwise. And what's unique about my perspective, and why I call myself the anti-choice determinist, is basically I understand that choice is an illusion. So I'm anti-choice, sort of in the sense of that I'm against the belief in choice, for example. Sort of like how, an anti-theist, they're not really against God because they're also atheists, but they're against a false belief, so they call themselves anti-theist. So I mean anti-choice in that sense. Also anti-choice in the sense of being anti-abortion. But here's what I want to get across to people, is that I want a morality based in truth, because truth is important. And here's the deal. I had a thought experiment recently where I was considering something. Let's suppose that we could lie to people and that made them behave better. Let's just say, for example, that people really did believe that if they do certain things, then they will be punished for it in their afterlife. And let's say that this belief caused them to behave better. Well, here's what's strange is, first of all, I don't think there's evidence to back that up, because people know a lot of people, first of all, they believe they will be punished in an afterlife based on certain things they do. Um, and also they know that they'll be punished by their government of their country or their family members or society in general. Will be punished in some way if they do something that's considered morally wrong. And of course, there's the whole objective subjective morality thing anyway. But the point is, people know they'll be punished for certain things, but they do them anyway. So here's the deal. So I don't think it works. I don't think you can always deter people from doing something just by threat of punishment. But let's say you could. Let's suppose that somebody were to tell everyone that if they consume animal products, let's say that unless somebody is vegan, then they will be reincarnated into an animal that suffers in a factory farm their whole life, in their next life, for example. Let's suppose that somebody spread this myth that we will all be punished if we're carnists, if we eat meat, dairy, eggs, or possibly honey, because of the harm that causes these other animals. Let's say somebody spread this belief that people will be punished for what they do to these animals. Well, here's the deal. Let's say it worked. Let's suppose that made everyone go vegan because they didn't want to be punished in their afterlife. Here's the deal. Even if that worked, I'm not going to spread a belief and tell people that a certain thing is true that I don't have evidence for. So I want to go a little bit deeper with this, okay? Because I don't believe in lying to people, even if it improves their behavior. Honesty is the best policy. And I now think that truth is more important to me than life itself. So that's the thing. Honesty is the best policy. And that's what I'm thinking about right now. But let me talk about times where we can't rely on knowing for sure what's true. I know that free will is false. I know that free will is false because it can't be made logically coherent. And we're not the self-causes of what we do, because we don't create ourselves, for one thing. But let me go into some other topics. There are two other topics I want to talk about in this video. One of them is evolution, biological evolution by natural selection and other things like that. Because that's quite controversial with people. And I really don't think it should be that controversial. I think that the only reason that there are people who don't believe in evolution is because they have a religious belief that conflicts with it, and their religion is important to them because they think that they have to believe a certain thing about their religion or they'll be punished in an afterlife for it. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. So I think it's just religious belief that's the only reason why people deny evolution. But there are going to be people out there who will say, well, how do you know evolution is true? And I'm going to clarify my position on evolution in a few minutes here, basically. What I'm going to do is, first of all, living things evolve. This is observable. The bacteria and the viruses and all sorts of animals, no animal looks exactly identical and behaves identical to its ancestors from 100 years ago even, or even 20 years ago. Children are not always the same as their parents. In physical appearance nor behavior, and genes play a part in determining our physical appearance and our behavior. Our behavior also is influenced by nurture, obviously, and our appearance is influenced by our diet, which is part of our nurture, obviously. But here's the thing that's important, is that things do change. And when I say I believe that evolution is a fact, I'm saying basically yes. Living things do change. And yes, they do change from one species to the next. Not that one living organism changes from one species to the next, but after the changes are so extreme after a long period of time, whether it be hundreds, thousands, millions, billions of years, I don't care. Eventually the change becomes so extreme that then basically scientists call it a different species because it's so different. You know what I mean? So yeah, evolution is a fact, but I don't. I'm not a very good defender of evolution for a few reasons. First of all, evolution doesn't play that big of a role in my philosophy, in my ethics of how to live life. It really doesn't. And here's what I mean. I don't see how what species we evolved from a billion years ago has to do with how I treat other people, whether those people are human or whether they're dogs or cats or horses or pigs or ants or whatever. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't influence how I treat people. For some people, it does. Once they learn they're biologically related to every other animal, then they have a respect for other life forms that maybe they didn't have before. But I went vegetarian and then vegan after I learned about the dairy and egg industry before I understood evolution, because I only recently understood evolution. But here's the deal. When somebody tells me specifically that about fossils and DNA evidence that shows that we had a common ancestor so many billions of years ago or whatever, well, I'm agnostic about that. Like, I don't necessarily just take people's word for it. And I don't have a way, because I'm not a trained archaeologist or geneticist, to know how to look at that evidence. I don't know where that evidence is or how to look at it. So I don't take people's word for it. I just say evolution is a fact, but I'm a little fuzzy on the details. So that's just it, is I have a basis for what I believe based on observation, that things do change over time, and I understand natural selection, certain things as they become, certain mutations as they become beneficial, that causes a change in behavior or some physical attribute that allows them to survive longer or reproduce more, that will allow those genes to be passed on, creating constant change that is noticeable over enough time. But anyway, enough about evolution. There's another topic I want to talk about, and this is climate change. Climate change or global warming or whatever, this whole deal that humans are polluting the atmosphere with so much carbon and methane that it's causing the polar regions to melt and the sea level to rise and play some part in natural disaster, though I'm not clear on that exactly. But I watched An Inconvenient Truth. I've watched a few documentaries on YouTube about climate change. Jamie sent me some by David Attenborough, I think. So I do believe that climate change is happening and that it is being caused by the awful pollution of humans. And why do I believe this? And here's the deal. Am I just accepting it on what people have told me? George tells me, who's that guy the Inconvenient Truth dude? How come I cannot think of that dude's name? Yeah, anyway, but yeah, Al Gore. I saw that, and that really was, watching Inconvenient Truth, enough to show me, well, yeah, there's something to this. And like, if I wanted to really, it would take a long time for me to actually see all the evidence myself that the climate is changing. I would have to be trained in those sciences. But here's the deal. I do believe climate change is happening. And it's one of those things it's not so easy to point to people. It's not that easy for me to show this to people. It's not as simple as discussing the free will topic. It's not as simple as explaining evolution by natural selection. But here's one of the things that really is interesting to me is, obviously, I don't think that with all the carbon dioxide, all the fossil fuels burnt, and all the methane from the insane animal industry, and the deforestation in the Amazon, clearly that's going to have an impact on the environment. I think that's a logical thing. I think that's understandable, that if you're cutting down the trees and you've got all this poop from the animals and has all this methane, that all this extra carbon dioxide, that's going to have an effect on the atmosphere. And I believe that's what's destroying what's called the ozone layer, the layer of oxygen that protects the Earth from being hit by the full heat of the sun. But it's not just that. It's not just that because the explanation makes sense to me why I believe it, and I do think there's evidence. It's also recent summers. I'm talking, the past, 5 or 6 years. The summers in Lee Summit have been hotter and hotter. Like when I first moved to Lee Summit with my mom, I was 9 years old. It was like 1996. I would play outside in the summers. There was never a time when it was really too hot. Sure, it was hot. I would sweat. I get sunburned if I stayed out too long. But the kinds of heat waves that we've had in recent years make me think that yes, the highest temperature is increasing. And so this is a lot of it. I really do think that I can feel in the summers it's getting hotter. And that's another thing that finally convinced me that, there's something really to this. I really do believe that it's not just this past year. Yeah, last year was really hot. The year before that was just about as hot. But it's not just these past 2 years. It's been a long time. It's gotten progressively hotter each summer. And of course, the thing about Missouri is it's a little bit hard to tell because it's winter one day, it's summer the next. People who live in Lee Summit, Missouri or other places in Missouri knows it's hot to cold, hot to cold. That's the way Missouri is. And that's why some people call it misery instead of Missouri. But yeah, so I do think there's a thing about climate change. But anyway, the point of talking about this, the point of talking about free will and the point of talking about evolution and climate change is it's not just that some dude will tell me something. The reason I don't believe in free will isn't just because George Ortega told me there's no free will and because other people have told me that. It's because there's no way to have the type of free will that is of the relevance to the religious argument of why people deserve to be rewarded or punished by God. And I think that's a very important thing. So it's not just because it's because free will is incoherent. And the reason I believe in evolution is not just because the smart scientist people say it. It's not just because Jerry Corner, Richard Dawkins says it. That's because there is a theory backed by evidence. That's just it. I don't take things at people's word. That's just it. And I really think that it's not just so much about the evidence that people talk about. It's about what is observable. It's not about fossil DNA evidence. It's about what is observable. And with the climate change thing, I think people are observing that things are getting hotter and the climate is changing in ways that humans are causing. So I think all this stuff is real. I think that evolution by natural selection is real and climate change is happening and that humans are causing it. So here's the deal. I have basis for things that I believe, and that's what's important. Because the whole point is we have reasons of things we believe in. Some people do just accept that something's true because some authority figure says it is. And I disagree with that. I disagree that just because a religious leader or the Bible says something, that's not what makes it true. Just because a scientist says something, that's not what makes it true. Just because a politician or your parents or whatever said so. There's nothing that's true because somebody says so. It's not. And here's the deal. I think more importantly, people talk about evidence and going wherever the evidence leads them to, and I think that's good. But there's something else that's important. I think that people have to have a theory and they have to have an already existing belief system before they go looking for evidence. That's the whole deal. People when they're trying to look for evidence of someone who committed a crime and find out, well, who stole this money or who killed this person, the event has to happen before they look for evidence as to how it happened and who did it. So evidence is the second step. The first step is the theory, or some claim or some theory. The second step is the evidence. And what's interesting is because of people's emotional bias, some of them believe it and some of them don't. But here's the thing about it. I honestly believe that for the most part, religious belief is behind why people believe in free will, even though it doesn't make sense. It's also why they deny evolution, and it's also why they deny climate change, a lot of it, because, their belief that God is in control of the climate and humans couldn't possibly do anything that would disturb the climate. So I think that's part of it, but another thing that I think is particularly interesting in the climate change thing is that the things that are being done, the burning of coal and oil and the animal agriculture industry that is destroying the forests and polluting with all kinds of animal poop and causing all sorts of diseases to spread, those are things that people need to stop doing anyway, regardless of whether there was climate change. So here's the deal. I actually, even though I think climate change is happening, I argue that people need to be switching to solar and wind power or whatever other energy source, and they need to go vegan regardless of whether climate change is true or not. So that's the thing about it. In that sort of a case, that's why it's not really so much of an issue whether people believe it or not, in a way. Because people need to be doing what is obviously best for everyone, even climate change aside. So that's the thing about it is, I think it's good to go with truth. When you know what is true, or at least you're convinced enough that you think something is true, well, you live by it. But what if you don't know what's true? When you don't know what's true, I think it's sort of one of those things where you hope for the best, prepare for the worst. Like you hope that this bad thing is not happening, but in case it is, you want to be prepared. You want to do what you can to avoid a tragedy. You know what I'm saying? So there's from the standpoint of truth, and then there's the standpoint of practicality, where you don't know what's true, but you're gonna, go. You want to be on the safe side. You want to be safe rather than sorry. So that's the thing. Is I think all the reasons why we do things, why we believe things, those are perfect explanations of causality. Why are we choosing this or that? It's kind of weird because technically I say we don't choose because it's not up to us. But, the way people talk is they say, yes, people choose things, but they don't choose what they choose. It's really funny, It's like, because everything we do, I mean, no matter what you chose to eat, you didn't choose to have a biological body that needs to eat. Because if we could just, not eat, if we didn't have bodies, we wouldn't eat, It's like you didn't choose that. And so I'm talking that there is no such thing as this 100% responsibility. I say we actually all have 0% responsibility for what we do because I understand determinism and indeterminism. And even though I'm a determinist where everything's causal, I just point out that indeterminism doesn't help. But yeah, so I hope that clarifies a few things. Our ethical systems, how we live our lives have to be based on truth. We can't just go with what we want to believe. We can't just go with spreading lies just to make people's behavior better. And so I've been thinking about truth and honesty recently and reconsidering everything, It's sort of, one more example is, there are two kinds of vegans. Some are the health vegans who go vegan for health reasons. Some are, so the animals aren't hurt or killed. And I'm more of the animal type, the animal defender type of vegan. When it comes to the doctors who explain the health benefits of going vegan, I don't just take their word for it. I know that my health has improved dramatically since I went vegan. But even so, that's not the message I promote because we need to do it for the animals regardless of whether or not it helps our health. So that's my position on that too. So I'm not so concerned about the truth about whether going vegan makes you healthier, even though my experience shows me it does. But truth is important and we should go with truth. And aside from that, we should go with whichever is the safest guess. whichever will cause the least harm if we assume it to be true. So I hope I've talked, I think I've talked enough about truth and free will, evolution, and climate change and all that. So I hope you've enjoyed this video, and let me know what you think. Bye.